I actually grew, you know? I grew so much by collaborating with people outside of my home culture.
My family being of many different backgrounds and not just Chinese, but Japanese and Portuguese Eurasian, it kind of helped to prepare me to be more open and borderless in terms of filmmaking.
动作、暴力、恐怖、爱情，这些呢就是属于呢是人性的一些故事。
Being Singaporeans doesn't mean we have to tell Singaporean stories as well.
We're between East and West. As a result, we get to observe and bear witness to the stories taking place around us.
I feel like we are sort of brought up to be, I don't know, the man of the world, you know?
We can be more daring enough to tell more international stories.
I think 新加坡的电影工业啊是面临最大的一个挑战。
The world is getting a more challenging place to make movies.
Funding films is getting more and more difficult.
现在拍电影的人呢很矛盾，疫情过后呢，新加坡的观众好像已经开始习惯了在家里看，在手机看，走进戏院的人呢已经有减少了，付费1个月很少的钱就看到很多部电影，所以现在的一个生活习惯呢，它的一个改变对电影业的一个冲击是非常非常大的。
You know, I mean, I think unfortunately Singapore is just too small a market, and you know, we have to get our films overseas, and it's important that go to festivals, you know, have those international sales agents to push the works. I mean, if you look at Korea, South Korea, you're talking about a population like 50 million, and in Singapore, 5 million, 2.5 real Singaporeans. It's very small.
Collaborating on a co-production allows us to have the films seen, you know, to a larger audience.
I, Singapore. I can speak Korea. 안녕하세요. 감사합니다. 사랑해요.
I was very aware when I was writing Ajuma that there would be scenes that are not part of the world that I'm from. And so it has always been a film that I knew I was going to set it abroad. I think the reality didn't hit me until I'm shooting in winter. I have a car chase scene. I'm shooting with a foreign crew in a language I don't speak.
There is loss in translation happening not just in front of the screen, but also behind the screen. Most of the crew, they barely spoke English. And this was really tough for us. And I made sure that I got a Korean translator that was Singaporean. You know, I found an old friend. She was a theater actress from Singapore that went to study acting in Korea. So she was able to translate what the director was saying in English using Korean. You know, like she could understand the nuances of motivation, of drama, of performance. And I think she really connected so closely and really bonded so well with the actors.
Really doing the research and doing the homework to make sure that we got things right, but also understanding that you can have different cultural backgrounds or different cultural landscapes, but the story works when it's universal.
I 殺咗你哋，
你有咩感覺？
好平靜。
7個商業犯罪記錄，越有錢越黐線。
攞獎嘅社工都會殺人。
Originally, it was supposed to be a Singaporean film. And as they are developing, I think MM2 decided that this is something that could go international, and they approached MM2 Hong Kong. I think I was told that basically it was a genre that they haven't seen in a while. It's those psychological thrillers, a little bit darker on the edge, you know. They were doing a lot more Molay-style stuff or action stuff. So I think it came at the right time when the Hong Kong audience is looking for something fresh.
I會好驚我有冇扭曲到本身編劇原 original 嗰個 story 嘅原意。咁但係嗰陣個編劇佢又非常之放手就你寫啦，我冇所謂㗎，你點樣發展都得。我都盡量好希望就係喺翻本身有嘅文字入邊去揾翻嗰個作者嘅感覺去延續咯。 呢個係我嗰陣要處理，即係 localize 同埋去 complete 個 script 嘅時候嘅一啲難處咯。
So when I arrived on set in Hong Kong, I was expecting like an older crew and everything like that.
佢一個人，佢係冇助手、冇朋友、冇伴侶，自己一個人飛咗嚟香港。成個團隊咧都係香港人嚟㗎嘛，咁我都會好驚就係佢哋一嚟可唔可以溝通到啦？嗰個film language 係咪 synchronize 啊？
I'm thankful that Mani, the producer, actually got me a younger crew that spoke a lot of English and Mandarin that allowed me to communicate with them better in some sense. So I'm the older one.
咁好處咧就係最後我真係去估唔到，佢揀咗一個當其時香港嘅一個幾新進嘅攝影師。呢位新進嘅攝影師咧，慢慢我覺得係有被佢培育到，成為咗而家香港一個遙手可熱嘅攝影師咯。
As Singaporeans, I feel like we are quite adaptable to different environments. I think a lot of us sometimes speak multiple languages, and it helps.
I wanted to share this little, I would say kind of like this is the Japanese script, and we refer to this on set. There's a number for each copy, and the director has the number 1. Because I remember when I offered this copy to my executive producer, he freaked out because like, no, it's only for the director. So this was like a tradition that they have when we start shooting the feature film. Yeah, so I adjusted very quickly to the different cultural nuances, but I would say that, shooting at a more international level made me realize that there's a lot more room to grow as a director, and I really embraced it.
So films like Breaking Ice, films like Popeye gave us the idea that you can make international stories, but just because it is not set in Singapore, the stories are still local in the sense that in a very global and local way. And I felt that was really, really exciting because we couldn't tell La Luna in Singapore. It's interesting because at the end of the day, even if you watch this on screen, it feels like a Malaysian film, but slightly off kilter. Something about it doesn't feel Malaysian. That's what the general consensus that I got. Is it because I'm a Malay Singaporean filmmaker? Do I just give a different perspective than the regular fare there? Maybe. But to me, that's the interesting part. I think nobody in this world could have made Breaking Ice than Anthony. I don't think anybody could have made La Luna but myself.
当我第一次看到呢《Children Have Fun》的时候，就是那叫做《小鞋子》这部电影，我看了我非常的喜欢，因为我很喜欢他那个兄妹之间的一个关系跟感情。之后呢，我在想说，他能不能够变成呢更多人看的一个商业电影？所以呢，我就决定了买了他的版权。其实当我做这个 adaptation 的时候就有一个影评人他竟然否定了我做这个 adaptation。他觉得呢不是我的原创，可是很好笑的就是，本来电影你去买人家的版权重拍的话，它也是一个新的创作。这部戏呢，后来呢在伊朗还有得了一个奖。我后来呢在大陆的一个电影节呢，也遇到了这个导演马吉，他知道是我买了他的copyright 来重拍，他也很高兴，就有点相见欢这样了。他说他很喜欢我拍的这个版本。我跟他讲说，很可惜没有办法到那边去亲自领奖，希望有机会再合作了。所以我希望呢，能够借助这些人的帮忙，我们可以把新加坡的电影呢带到呢更大的一个市场去。
So when we're in Singapore, when we accidentally zoom out, right, you'll see Serangoon, Ang Mo Kio, Bishan, right? But when we were there, when I accidentally zoomed out, I disappeared. It just shows how big that country was, and I think it felt like it was metaphorical for me to realize that the world is really, really big. For me, making La Luna made me realize that, yeah, we have a lot more stories to tell.
電影發展比較成熟嘅城市之一，其實正都係新加坡，因為而家香港都面對緊香港電影嗰個工業，又或者嗰個票房嘅難處。因為當香港電影要面向亞洲嘅時候，其實未必淨係我哋純香港人去製作，其實係可以做多啲 collaboration， 咁令到部戲先至可以行得更遠啲啊。
The more and more I make my films, the more I realize that this sort of cross-cultural collaboration and cooperation actually pushes my work much further and pushes me much further as a filmmaker.
I grew up on a whole diet of supernatural horror films, and I was watching this movie with my son, Edward, called Hell in the Pacific. And you basically have Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mufini, two soldiers during World War II, trying to kill each other on an island. And how about we take it one step further, and there's a sea creature that comes up, right? And then the two enemies have to become partners to defeat this creature. And Mike banged out the script in 2 weeks. Absolutely fantastic. And we're here now, and we're shooting Orang Ikan.
This film is, in essence, a homage to a lot of the creature films that were made back in the day, but also it's about friendship. Growing up, I was born in Singapore and then moved to Indonesia when I was young and then got sent to UK. I have a very East-West sensibility, so that really informed me of how to work with people of different nationalities.
I think the film began with an image. It was literally that. A man walking at a pedestrian lane in Manila. And then with that image, I started coming up with a story that kind of reflected this sort of anger that I was feeling. It was a very specific anger that I felt back in 2017.
Oasis of Now is also based on a very specific place, this old apartment. The story revolves around my connection to this building. It's the place where my stepfamily lives. Of course, there is certain, I would not say memory, but more like a feeling. And that particular feelings I want to express with cinema, with film.
Ở Việt Nam thì có một vấn đề là các thứ nó thay đổi rất là nhanh chóng. Thì có những thứ mà nó hiện ra ở ngay trước mắt mình thôi thì dần dần thì mình cũng cứ như là có cái cảm giác là nó sẽ biến mất rất là nhanh. Cái phim dài này đầu tiên là xuất phát từ những cái cảm giác về cái tuổi thơ của tôi. Đầu tiên là cái tuổi thơ mà khi mà ở cùng với bà nội. Tức là buổi trưa thì được bà ru ngủ và nghe được những cái tiếng, cái âm thanh cơ thể và cái âm thanh và cái mùi của sân vườn ở xung quanh. Thì có những thứ mà nó xuất hiện ở trong phim, nó là cái cảm giác mà mình thấy được hoặc mình tìm được hồi bé. Nhưng mà mình cũng hiểu là có thể bây giờ nó không còn có lại được nữa.
Anatomy of Time มันแรงบันดาลใจมันมาจากเรื่องของคุณแม่คือผมเห็นในช่วงสุดท้ายของคุณพ่อเนี่ยคือผมเห็นแม่ดูแลพ่อแบบต้องเช็ดตัวดูแลพ่อเป็นผู้ป่วยติดเตียงอะไรอย่างเงี้ยฮะมันก็เริ่มจากคำถามที่ว่าถ้าแม่เราดูแลแบบนี้ไปเรื่อยๆแล้วมันจะคุ้มไหมหรือว่าทำไมทำอะไรที่เป็นสิ่งที่ทำให้แม่เราต้องทุ่มเทในการดูแลผู้ชายคนนี้ถึงขนาดนี้ทั้งๆที่เราก็คิดว่าเขาคงไม่ได้มีความรักให้กันแล้วอะไรเงี้ย
Anatomy of Time appealed to me because of the story. And so when I read the script, I was right away connected with the story because it reminded me of some people I know also in Indonesia. I mean, I was born in Indonesia. So there were stories that are connected, I find, in Southeast Asia. A lot of the things that Jack Rawal puts in his script are things that were familiar to me from my childhood, for example. But I listened to my mother. So there were a lot of things that kind of spoke to me right away.
Cái quá trình mà gọi vốn cho phim Cô Ly Không Bao Giờ Khóc thì hơi tốn thời gian bởi vì thật ra đấy là cái phim đầu tiên, phim dài đầu tiên và tôi cũng không rõ là nên đi theo cái hướng nào để gọi. Nhưng mà đến khoảng cái năm gần cuối, cách đây khoảng 3 năm trước dịch ấy, thì có một cái cơ hội gặp Su Trinh và sau đấy và trước đấy nữa là cả Wei Jing. Thì đấy là hai cái người mà bản thân khi mà tôi gặp thì đều thấy là những cái người rất là tốt, ít nhất là tốt về mặt con người ấy, và rất là hợp với cái cách làm việc hoặc là cái cách để mà tôi mong muốn là có một người sản xuất bởi vì bình thường khi mà tôi làm đạo diễn thì có thể có một cái cách có một cái sự gì đấy nó hơi trở nên là một cái người hơi đòi hỏi một chút và thật ra rất là mong có gặp được những cái người sản xuất mà tức là có thể bảo vệ mình ở những cái lúc mà mình khá là gặp khó khăn, tức là không phải mỗi là trong cái lúc mà gọi vốn mà kể cả trong những lúc mà có những cái quyết định về phim.
I've always been fascinated by the history of Vietnam, and I think that the war has been so recent that people are still processing that collective trauma. As a trailing spouse and expat wife in Bangkok, I sympathized with how this woman had been pushed along by the tides of history. So I really felt for the character, and I saw some of Learn's short films, and he had a very distinct and sensitive but singular vision, which I connected with. So we decided to apply for the grant together.
The Singapore Film Commission's launch of the Southeast Asia Grant was unique, and I think it was something that actually probably was born from several producers here who felt that working in the region was something that was the time to do it.
Grant อันเนี้ยสำคัญมากสำหรับ Southeast Asia filmmaker นะฮะเพราะว่าคืออย่างในประเทศไทยเนี่ยเราไม่มี grant ที่จะ support filmmaker ไทยโดยเฉพาะคือจากรัฐบาลโดยตรงเนี่ยมีน้อยมาก
thì lúc đấy vô hình chung mình cũng rút được nhiều cái khoảng cách, cái khó khăn rồi, bởi vì diễn giải ra cho những cái người mà họ gần với nền văn hóa của mình hơn thì rồi gì cũng dễ hơn.
I think for young Singaporean filmmakers to know that SFC has been really integral to making the visions come true, because I think in a lot of countries there's always a struggle for young filmmakers to find a way to raise money, to find support, and to find direction.
Lần sau mình không gặp nhau ở đây nhớ có được không?
Thôi giận nữa nhìn mặt xấu lắm. Quay mặt lại để chơi với nhau.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Singapore Film Commission probably is the first agency that come up with a regional co-production fund. Every producer in the region will be like, wow, like, yes, that's the one that we want to get. And we were very new in this. To us, it's like, oh, we have a script and we really need funding to do it. So he wrote an email to Fran. We didn't get the grant when we first applied. We both have a lot of self-doubt. We thought like, it must be we are not good enough. But Fran was like, no, you have this. Yvonne, you have this. Shisam, you have this.
I told Fran that time, I don't care. Even if you don't get any money into the project, I still want you to be my producer. And I talk like this, maybe I sound like very innocent, or not innocent, like very naive. But for me to have someone that really trusts the project and really loves the project, for me, it doesn't matter this person bring in money or not.
Of course, we are very excited when we finally get it, because it kind of closed financing the gap at the end of the project. Otherwise, we would have to change a lot of plans.
One of the worries that we had, like with me and my Filipino producers, was, are we really going to get support from Singapore, like the Singapore Film Commission for our film? To me, as a queer storyteller, it's just this raw, honest portrayal of Filipino queer youth as I see it today, and that experience is rarely seen, not just in like Filipino cinema, but with Southeast Asian cinema in general. With it being such like a taboo topic, it's a great pleasure that the Singapore Film Commission supported these projects, and having this support means a lot to me, because acknowledging that a film like this would get made on this scale is something that shouldn't be like a rare thing. It could be a thing that could inspire, like other younger filmmakers who would want to make these kinds of films. And I want to have like this piece of Filipino queer cinema as part of like this ongoing movement and history with Southeast Asian cinema as a whole.
I think we have just a rich story, but we lack of the economy and opportunity to tell that rich story. So this is why this kind of collaboration is really important. Otherwise, this story will never get told.
I think when the region comes together, we're hunting in packs. When people see some of the stuff that we built in terms of just the set construction from production value side of things, I think it just proves again how effective a Singapore and Indonesia kind of a production can actually stretch your dollar, really, in terms of putting value on screen.
Trong cái khu vực Đông Nam Á thì nó lại là một cái khu vực rất đặc biệt, bởi vì nó gần như là, ví dụ nhìn theo cái lăng kính châu Âu thì nó là một khu vực mà là cái vùng trũng của văn hóa, của nghệ thuật. Nhưng mà nếu như nhìn theo cái lăng kính bản địa ở cái nơi đấy thì nó lại là nơi mà có một cái sự đa dạng và có rất là nhiều cái màu sắc mà cái văn minh bên ngoài cái vùng đó thì chưa thể hiểu được hết. Thì chỉ có một cái cách là có những cái cách hiểu trực tiếp từ bên trong ấy, thì nó mới có thể tạo ra được một cái sự đa dạng riêng.
I don't feel like I'm a Vietnamese filmmaker staying in Singapore. I feel like I'm a Southeast Asian filmmaker and just based in Singapore. Being here, I think it's an advantage. When I compare myself to filmmakers in Vietnam, for example, the traditional route for Vietnamese art house film is always to get a Vietnamese producer, but I couldn't find any Vietnamese producer that I could kind of like vibe with. When I talked to Sương and then, I realized things that I appreciate from her. And I think that is the moment when I decided that, okay, let's, give birth to this baby together. You and me, you as my main producer and I'm the director. And I don't care about all the usual route that a Vietnamese film should go.
As with CN, like one of my fondest memories was when we saw the cut that we were very happy about as a team. She brought like a bottle of Prosecco to celebrate the success, because that was the time that I really literally teared up in the editing room watching the film, because I felt like that was the time that I felt like the film was complete and I was with the Singaporean team.
I suppose as a producer, my own aspiration is to continue making stories that I think are true to our region. I think it's an interesting time where there's a lot of attention in Asia. There is growing attention in Southeast Asia, and I hope that our stories can be shared on a global stage. I kind of want to make something culturally iconic, and I think of something like Friends, not necessarily in its format or that it's a sitcom, but how people relate to it, and that's my personal hope as a producer, to produce something that is of that scale.
I've always loved telling stories, and directing to me is a way to have a conversation with the world and with the people I work with and with myself.
I naturally feel I'm a very melancholic person. So usually those times, I think there's a very strong pull to telling stories.
I think it's really about unpacking how we observe people and how we feel and trying to discern our relationships.
I don't think there's any other sort of form of art that is as communal. It's a kind of very strange form of intimacy when you're making a film.
When you feel that someone is in utter despair, but then there is also a sense of hope at the end. If I can find that two very contrary elements in one of the characters, yes, then I think that has my curiosity to kind of continue with that story, that character.
I understand what you mean by utter despair. It's okay, now I've been cursed with this story. Yes, it's gonna haunt me until I make it.
But I just feel here of late there has been this fear going on, first feature. Because if it doesn't hit or tick the boxes, what happens? 10 years ago, I wanted to do my first feature. When the first feature grant was okay, I was started writing already. And then my mother asked me, so what are you going to do after your first feature? The second feature? She said, forget it. So I think the word first feature, I don't know, it's almost like a fear now.
When I was in film school, I think the first director that I felt oh, this person is like me was Sanif Oleg. And it was just a sense of he is also a Boyanese filmmaker and I'm a Boyanese filmmaker. And he was trying to make specific sort of messages with his film, especially with regards to culture. Despite all the challenges, he's still trying to make films that have this sort of message or ideas in mind, because he feels it's very important that we are sharing who we are to the world, and also it's also for him, at least for me actually, discovering myself a little bit, which is why like now I'm a bit more in tune. I'm trying to make films about myself and my own culture.
I've never really gave a huge thought or emphasis on like race or even the word Singaporean filmmaker. The inspiration is really, I think, from the times you have grown up, like what you have seen, and I think at least I owe it to my parents because we were moving many homes. So I got to experience a lot of like different kind of neighbours, so I think I had a very different childhood. What that comes classically is just memories, and of course being a Singaporean, when people maybe analyze your work or see through your film, okay, yeah, you know, race happens, because I think things that has impacted me in a much more closer space. So I guess community comes in.
When you're truthful to yourself and try your best in the process to be truthful in the making of it, that is the magic of film. When suddenly you watch something that you resonate with, that just clicks. And I feel like, at least for me, that's why I got into film.
Like in Singapore, we are so diverse. And I feel like the more we try to have that singular voice, the harder it is to be global. Like the less we are ashamed about ourselves and like allow the diversity in some sense. And then that might become a natural process.
I feel like for the industry, it's almost like building up a civilization. Hopefully, in the future generation, when they watch the works that we do, there's a certain, we see it and we understand, oh yeah, that is a Singapore film.
What we should all collectively bring to the global stage, right, is the sian vibes of Singapore. We should make films that sianness is an existential crisis, right? And that sianness doesn't have to all appear in one wide shot that pans from left to right for 5 minutes. It can also come in different genres.
Like the Han and Korea.
Yeah. If we can show that this feeling, that'll be great.
So I also want to know like how you all continue, how do you all keep doing it when it's this tough?
I would say the first feature is like a baptism of fire. We are so captivated by that magic, by everyone's energy coming together to bring something from like script to screen. If you ask me like, can I do something else? I think it's a bit difficult.
I mean, I was very lucky that I got to shoot the first feature in Taiwan. It was challenging, but then I think in hindsight, like, it was very fulfilling. I need to bring this up now. Sorry for interest. But yeah, this is a prop from my first feature, and it's a fencing film.
We were in Locarno together. Also my first feature with Nelson Yeo's first feature. It was made on a very, very micro budget, and then it was done in 5 days, and the audience received it quite well. So
Wait, you shot a feature in 5 days?
Yeah, because we couldn't get any grants and stuff. Everyone was in it for realizing this dream, and yeah, so then we just did it.
I'm curious how you guys like keep your teams motivated when your production is like, takes a year or 2 years. Like, what's that like? I think love and passion. Must be love for the project. Yeah. If not, like 24, we shot for 3 years, like on, off. Nobody will fund it, so we fund ourselves, so we make commercials. Then whatever we make, we used to make 24. So, but it's the love for the project, I guess.
Production that are made independently, there is a different kind of freedom, that although you might not have as much resources, but you have a freedom to do what you want to do in the way you want it to be.
Yeah, we made Piece of Meat. So that was the film that went to Khan, director for Night. That was SFC short film grant. We would not be able to make those very strange films without the support. Your main character is a lamb chop, but because the grant is just, they're so open about what kind of concepts you could propose. So that's actually very, very encouraging for young filmmakers, I feel.
I like young filmmakers. They have so much ambition about the script. They have no thought about how much it will cost, which I think is good, because I think for me, I'm a bit jaded already. So whenever I look at the script, it's like, oh no, okay, this one costs money, this one costs money. So I have to try to cut. But then for them is, when I talk to them, they will tell me their intentions, and their passion about certain scenes will make me, okay, let's try to find other ways of doing things.
So right now, I feel like there's a shift in producing where the producers, we may not be directors, but then we can see the end product and what we want it to eventually be.
So I've always liked the media industry. I want to influence what goes out because whatever that we produce, it influences the younger generation, the future generation.
I think my hopes are that the industry will always find its own talent. It will always inspire the next generation, and for the next generation to continue to make products, to make content, to make films that people fall in love with. So that would be my ambition for the industry. How about Justin?
I think my most memorable moments has to be working with the team here, as well as being part of that process together to help make somebody's creative dreams come true.
The Singaporean today is also very different, and each of us are also different. We have our own stories to tell. So I think there are just too many things that could be a possibility that comes in all shapes and forms. So
personally, I think our Singaporean story has interest of from a global community to look at what we have to share, and I think we definitely have a lot to offer.
I hope that the industry also help us to help them and to believe in us that we are not only funding and money, but we also give them support in various forms, and that we all are in this together to make it to SFC 50 or even SFC 100.
I guess at the highest level, my hope for our film industry is that anyone thinks about filmmaking in Asia, they'll all think about working with Singapore and working with Singapore filmmakers.
We just finished another film and we wanted to just do something easy and simple. So we decided that the best way to do it is actually maybe we shoot a film in a resort. On the first day of shoot, we actually decided that we wanted to because we wanted the whole thing to be really fun, really chill. The first thing we did on set was to set up a barbecue pit, and it started raining, unfortunately, and we were all stranded. Thankfully, the rain cleared up after maybe an hour, and the first shot that we wrote kind of like establishes the language of the film, and it's something that we carry through as we develop the film. We felt like, hey, we can develop the film further. We fell in love with the characters and the actors, and we felt like there was so much more to these characters. When the film premiered at Locarno, it was quite an overwhelming experience because it was to a sold-out audience, and it's just really heartening to hear all these good feedback from the audiences. I remember at Locarno, everyone was reacting differently to the performances of each of the actors. There are people who actually really enjoy Doreen's performance. They recognize Peter from Land Imagine. There are some people who actually really love Calvin's performance, even though he's not as experienced as the other two actors. So I really think there are more room for Singaporean actors to go international.
Having an international outlook for me is quite important because when I was making my short films, I had the opportunity to travel to Busan, to Cannes, to San Sebastian to show my short films. And being there, I met filmmakers from all over the world, from Latin America to different parts of Asia, European filmmakers. So I always felt like I was part of this bigger community. As any young filmmaker, I think most of the time in Singapore, most of us are very interested in the Taiwanese New Wave. And so that was incredibly attractive to me. I started having this idea about making a feature film. The film is also partly shot in Taiwan, and these locations are all in mountains, in high altitudes, in forests, and that was a very difficult track, and it really took almost all of our energy, to be honest, because it was during winter, it was cold, it was freezing, and filming poses a lot of challenges, but at the same time, when you have a story to tell and you are so invested in it, I didn't feel like it mattered like this kind of suffering, to be honest. Yeah.
I think a lot of times people don't realize that this job is not as glamorous as it looks, right? People focus on the end product, people focus on the interviews, people focus on the photos, right? And I think that it's tough being out there. My dad was a taxi driver when I was growing up, and my mom was a waitress. And to want to pursue a career in film and TV feels very frivolous. 你喜欢那个台湾犯罪故事吗？你看了2集。
有点模糊哎，真的有点模糊哎，
有点模糊，
因为他一直跳来跳去啊，
跳来跳
你要
哦，
有可能要看到最后一集才会明白啊。
I was in LA doing my internship, and I thought I wanted to stay in LA because everyone wanted to stay in LA. When I was trying to apply for jobs, I kept getting turned down. I kept getting turned down in Singapore too. So it was a time when China was buying up so much in Hollywood, and I kind of just decided that they must need a lot of bilingual executives. And since I grew up speaking Chinese, right, I naively thought that China would need me. So what happened was I pitched myself to 3 companies. So that's how I ended up in China.
I was trained both in the East and the West. You know, I went to film school, 3-year film school at Ngee Polytechnic in Singapore, and then I went to the UK to do my master's at the National Film and Television School. I was one of maybe like 2 or 3 Asian students in the entire school. I've always felt like I'm a filmmaker that has got very sort of like Western craft and Western methods, but with a very Eastern sensibility. You know, I think wherever I go, I still bring the Eastern sensibility, you know, into my work. I feel that we are sort of brought up to be the man of the world, you know? I think what's interesting about being a Singaporean is that we grow up in a very multicultural society.
I stayed in China from 2012 to 2015. I think in 2014, 2015, the American studios, the American production companies were really coming into China. I was like one of 3 or 4 people who could speak English. So I dealt with all the American executives, and that, I guess, caught the attention of John Pinotti of SK Global. He was looking to expand his business into Asia, and he wanted someone who could speak Chinese but understood American film studio, which is a very, very specific requirement. Crazy Rich Asians was very special because I never thought that there would be a Hollywood film about Singaporeans and very specifically, you know, the very, very rich people in Singapore. So it did open a door for me to experience a different side of my hometown. Pinotti had just optioned the book, and there was no Asian producer and not even Singaporean producer within, you know, in the above the line, and he thought that, you know, since I'm Singaporean, it's only natural for me to be on point for this project. You would have never thought that your identity as a Singaporean, as an Asian, would one day pay off in Hollywood, right? So it did feel like the stars aligned. It was a very, very magical sense of, you know, opportunity given. What made Crazy Rich Asians more special was that, you know, I got to work with people whom I love. Adele Lim, you know, a Malaysian writer, you know, she was brought in, so there was a camaraderie within the room. We get to share stories about our culture with the producers and the director. So I think that was essential in making the script authentic, you know, culturally.
I shot my first mainland Chinese film called The Breaking Ice in the north of China, extreme north of China. Very cold in -20 degrees. And I made a very summary film in the UK and Greece several months later. And, you know, like they're completely polar opposites. Like there's nothing that you would think is Singaporean in it. You know, it's so far apart from my own background, you know, our own stories in Singapore. But I always find sort of humanity in these stories. You know, I always find something personal and something emotional that moves me in a very, very deep way, and that's how I make my work.
When I moved to the States, it was a different culture, you know, like first I was made known that I'm Asian, right? And then I'm suddenly aware that I'm actually a woman, you know? So to battle racism, sexism, and also ageism, you know, like people are too young or too old to do anything, and being so far away from home can feel very isolating. And then the work itself is also very competitive because as a foreigner, many times I feel like I need to pay my dues. I need to prove that I can do this. And then even if I failed, I knew that, I'm responsible for it instead of trying to fit into a mold or trying to fit into someone's expectation. I'm okay with it. If I were to meet the 14, 15-year-old self back in Choa Chu Kang Secondary School, if I were to tell Janice that, oh, you would one day travel overseas, you will one day, make art, you will make art and business, I think she wouldn't believe it. So sometimes, like in the midst of struggle, I try to remind myself like how far I've come.
I had crew from Britain, France, the US, Greece. It was very, very international, but in a very Western way. But I felt a certain ease, and I'll be very honest, there is deep inside, you sort of feel quite good that, you're this young Asian filmmaker from this small little country and you're here sort of like heading up and leading an entire team of Europeans and Americans,
Having seen Singaporean actors shine on screen, especially on a Hollywood set, that brought a lot of comfort to my heart. And I think that was the first time I kind of saw a glimmer of hope, especially in the commercial film space. So that was the first time I really started thinking about how can I really give back to Singapore? How can we help Singapore storytellers to get into the bigger Chinese language theatrical market? How can we translate the knowledge that we learned from American producing into application in Asia, right?
During the pandemic, I felt like perhaps this is all going to end. I thought I was witnessing the collapse of what I love so much, when cinemas close and production all stopped. And then I made this short film, 2021, I returned to Cannes, and it's the same feeling, like going into the Palais again, watching a film in there, and feeling that cinema is still alive. It healed me of my existential crisis. It gave me so much sort of like hope that the big screen is here to stay, and the power of what we're doing as filmmakers is here to stay for a long, long time.